Good day, guys. Today we are diving into a fascinating yet a bureaucratic mess of a topic. Who was running Japan in World War II? Or rather, who were the people running Japan in the early 20th century? Imperial Japan, particularly during the early 20th century and World War II, had a multifaceted leadership structure. The leader at first glance of the nation was the emperor, revered as a divine symbol and a central figure in Japanese culture. But how much actual power did the emperor wield? Was he the true leader making the critical decisions, or were there other forces at play? In this video, we'll explore the power dynamics of Imperial Japan. We'll look at the symbolic role of the emperor and how this evolved over time. We'll delve into the real power brokers, including the military leaders and political figures who shaped Japan's aggressive expansionist policies. We'll also examine the chain of command within the Japanese government, the split between the army and the navy, and the cultural and ideological influences that guided their decisions. By the end of this video, you will have a clearer understanding of who truly led Imperial Japan and how their leadership affected both their country and the world. Sorry for the quick intermission, but if you enjoyed the video, then consider subscribing. It's free and you can always change your mind later. Also, join my Discord, link in my profile, for discussions as we build a community. To understand the leadership of Imperial Japan, we first need to look at the historical context that shaped its power structure. The story begins with the Meiji Restoration in 1868. Prior to this, Japan was a feudal society ruled by the Tokugawa shogunate, a military government that kept the emperor as a mere figurehead. However, in 1868, a coalition of samurais, officials, young nobles, and feudal lords restored the emperor's political power and abolished the shogunate through the Meiji Restoration. This event led to significant reforms that facilitated Japan's modernization and industrialization. This period, known as the Meiji era, saw Japan rapidly transformed into a centralized imperial state. Emperor Meiji, who reigned from 1868 to 1912, became a symbol of national unity and progress. Under his rule, Japan adopted Western technologies and governmental structures. They also built a modern military and began to expand its influence in Asia. The establishment of the Meiji Constitution in 1889 further solidified the emperor's position as the head of state. This constitution also created a dual structure of government, combining a parliamentary system to aid the emperor's supposed supreme authority. The true power often lay with the general, a group of elder statesmen who acted as the emperor's advisors, and also in the hands of rising military leadership. As Japan entered the 20th century, its ambitions grew. Victories over the First Sino-Japanese War and the Russo-Japanese War skyrocketed their national pride and confidence. And by the time of the First World War, Japan had further solidified its status as a formidable rising power, seizing German territories in the Pacific and East Asia. However, it was the lead-up to World War II that the complexity of Japan's leadership truly came to the forefront of things. The Showa era under Emperor Hirohito saw Japan's military leaders gaining unprecedented influence. The country pursued aggressive expansionist policies, leading to invasions in China, Southeast Asia, and ultimately the attack on Pearl Harbor in 1941. So now obviously, Emperor Hirohito was a figurehead, but now let's discuss about what his role as the emperor was. At the heart of the Japanese political system was the emperor, who was revered as a divine figure embodying the spirit of the nation. This reverence was deeply rooted in Shinto beliefs, which positioned the emperor as a descendant of the sun goddess Amaterasu. This divine status granted him immense cultural significance, but the extent of his actual political power was more complicated. During the Meiji era, Emperor Meiji was instrumental in Japan's modernization efforts. His support for reforms was vital in transforming Japan from a feudal society into a modern state. The Meiji Constitution established him as the sovereign ruler, but it also vested real power in the hands of the military and the general, who often made critical decisions on the emperor's behalf. For instance, while the emperor had the authority to appoint ministers and commanders, many of these appointments were heavily influenced by the military elite. This created a situation where the emperor was seen as a unifying figure, but not necessarily the ultimate decision maker. As we move into the Showa era, the role of Emperor Hirohito further exemplifies this dynamic. Initially, Hirohito was viewed as a symbolic leader, but as militarism rose in the 1930s, his position became more complex. He faced immense pressure from military leaders who believed in expansionism and aggressive policies. One of these pivotal moments was the attack on Pearl Harbor. Although he was presented as a supporter of the military's actions, many historians debate the extent of his involvement and whether he truly had the power to oppose the military's decisions. In post-war Japan, the perception of the emperor shifted dramatically. Following Japan's defeat, Hirohito renounced his divine status in a famous radio address, marking a significant change in his role. Under the Allied occupation, he became a constitutional monarch with limited power, further solidifying the notion that he had been more of a figurehead during the war. Having examined the symbolic role of the emperor, it's time to delve into the real power within Imperial Japan, the military leadership and key political figures who truly influenced the country's direction. During the early 20th century, the military's influence in Japan grew significantly. This was a period when Japan rapidly militarized and expanded. There were two dominating rival branches within the military: the Imperial Japanese Army, the IJA, and the Imperial Japanese Navy, the IJN, both of which played pivotal roles in shaping national policy. The army wanted to prioritize continental expansion, particularly in Asia. It aimed to secure resources and territories in China and Siberia. However, the Imperial Navy prioritized maritime dominance and securing sea lanes. It emphasized expanding Japan's influence in the Pacific and Southeast Asia. We all know who came out on top in the end. Several factors gained the IJN more prominence, such as the struggle for resources Japan faced, which supported the argument that the IJN presented, that Japan's survival and success depended on controlling the Pacific and more trade routes, with an expansion towards Southeast Asia for more resources. Anyways, one of the most significant figures in shaping Japan's national policy was General Hideki Tojo. Tojo served as the Prime Minister of Japan from 1941 to 1944, a period that included the attack on Pearl Harbor and much of World War II. He is known for his support of militaristic and expansionist policies. Tojo was instrumental in pushing Japan into conflict with the United States and other Allied powers. Tojo was not alone. He was supported by a bureaucratic group of military leaders who believed in Japan's imperial destiny. Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto, for instance, was a key naval strategist and the architect of the Pearl Harbor attack. Despite his personal reservations about going to war with the United States, Yamamoto executed one of the most significant military operations in Japanese history. The power dynamics between the army and civilian governments were often blurred. While Japan had a parliamentary system, real political power frequently lay with the military leaders and their advisors. The prime minister, though a civilian position, was often filled by military figures or those aligned with military interests. Japan also had influential political advisors and elder statesmen, or the general. Although their direct influence waned over time, their legacy of guiding imperial policy set a precedent for strong advisory roles. Figures like Prince Saionji Kimoshi, one of the last general, played crucial roles in advising the emperor and shaping the direction of the nation. For instance, Saionji sought to maintain a balance between the increasingly assertive military factions and the civilian government. He understood the risk posed by unchecked military power and worked to ensure that civilian leaders retained influence in governmental affairs. However, he passed away in the November of 1940, which left military power unchecked and thus the appointment of Tojo as the prime minister. The military and political elite made critical decisions that steered Japan through its aggressive expansion in Asia and its involvement in World War II. They were responsible for major campaigns including the invasions of China and Southeast Asia and the strategic decisions that led to the Pacific War. Understanding the real power in Imperial Japan requires recognizing the dominance of military leaders and their impact on both domestic and international policies. Their influence extended beyond mere military strategy, affecting economic, social, and political aspects of Japanese life. The emperor was officially the supreme authority at the top of Japan's chain of command. However, as we have discussed, his role was often more symbolic than operational. The real day-to-day decisions were made by the government and military leaders. Directly beneath the emperor were two critical groups, the cabinet and the imperial general headquarters. These bodies were responsible for making and implementing policy decisions. The cabinet, led by the prime minister, included civilian ministers who managed various aspects of the government. The emperor appointed the prime minister, often based on recommendations from influential advisors like the general or elder statesmen. Simultaneously, the Imperial General Headquarters, established in 1937, was the highest authority on military affairs. It coordinated the activities of the IJA and the IJN. The Imperial General Headquarters reported directly to the emperor, but it operated with significant autonomy in practice. Within the military, the chain of command flowed from the general staff to field commanders. In the IJA, this meant orders came from the chief of the army, general staff, to regional commanders and down to individual units. Similarly, in the IJN, the chief of the navy, general staff, issued directives to fleet commanders and then to individual ships and naval bases. The decentralized structure of command often resulted in independent actions of field commanders, particularly within the IJA. For example, the Mukden incident in 1931, which led to the invasion of Manchuria. It was initiated by junior officers without explicit approval from Tokyo. This incident exemplifies how local military leaders could act autonomously, sometimes leading to significant political and military consequences. The IJN also operated with a degree of independence. The diversification of the chain of command, with the IJA and the IJN acting semi-independently, often led to strategic disarray. The lack of unified command sometimes meant that the army and navy operations were not fully coordinated, leading to inefficiencies and missed opportunities. In summary, while the emperor was at the top of the chain of command, the real power lay with the cabinet and the imperial general headquarters. The independent operations of the IJA and IJN, coupled with the autonomous actions of field commanders, created a complex and often fragmented command structure. The decentralized nature of the chain of command, with the IJA and IJN operating independently, often led to significant strategic and operational challenges. One of the most striking examples, as I mentioned earlier, of these challenges was the Mukden incident. The IJA's unilateral decisions didn't end there. During the Second Sino-Japanese War, which began in 1937, the IJA's aggressive and often brutal tactics in China created international condemnation and strained Japan's diplomatic relations. The IJA operated with significant autonomy, conducting campaigns with little coordination with the civilian government or the IJN. On the other hand, the IJN also had significant autonomy. The IJN's focus on naval dominance and the IJA's focus on continental expansion sometimes led to conflicting priorities and inefficient use of resources. During the Pacific War, the lack of coordination between the IJA and IJN became increasingly evident. For instance, the Guadalcanal campaign in 1942 highlighted these issues. The IJA and IJN struggled to support each other effectively, leading to supply shortages and strategic missteps. The IJN's inability to maintain control of the sea around Guadalcanal and the IJA's logistical challenges on land contributed to Japan's eventual defeat in the campaign. The Battle of Midway in June 1942 further exposed this weakness in Japan's command structure. The IJN, confident after its early successes, underestimated American intelligence capabilities and coordination. The loss of 4 aircraft carriers in Midway was a significant blow to Japan's naval power and shifted the balance in the Pacific in favor of the Allies. As the war progressed, the lack of a unified command structure became a critical weakness. the IJA and IJN continued to pursue their independent strategies, often without full cooperation or support from each other. This fragmentation hindered Japan's ability to mount a cohesive defense against the increasingly coordinated and resource-rich Allied forces. The lack of a unified command and the internal divisions within Japan's military and government structure were significant factors in Japan's ultimate surrender. In summary, the fragmented chain of command in Imperial Japan, characterized by the independent operations of the IJA and IJN, significantly impacted Japan's military campaigns and strategic decisions. The lack of coordination and conflicting priorities led to inefficiencies and strategic failures, contributing to Japan's defeat in World War II. Throughout our journey into the power structure of Imperial Japan, we have examined the symbolic role of the emperor, the influential military leaders, and the complex chain of command that directed the nation during one of the most tumultuous periods in its history. Now let's bring it all together and understand who were truly leading Japan. At the top of the hierarchy was the emperor, a figure of profound cultural and spiritual significance. While the emperor was considered the supreme authority, his role was largely symbolic. The real power often resided elsewhere. The Imperial Japanese Army, the IJA, and the Imperial Japanese Navy, the IJN, were led by powerful and influential military figures. Key leaders such as General Tojo, who served as the Prime Minister and was a central figure in Japan's wartime government, he also played critical roles in shaping Japan's military strategy and national policies. Admiral Yamamoto, the mastermind behind the attack on Pearl Harbor, and other senior Navy leaders like Admiral Nagumo Shuchi directed Japan's naval strategies and operations. Their decisions had profound impacts on the course of the war in the Pacific. Alongside the military leaders, civilian politicians and advisors held significant sway. The Prime Minister, appointed by the Emperor, but often chosen based on recommendations from influential groups like the General, led the civilian government. Figures such as Prince Saionji Kimochi, a general who played a pivotal advisory role, guiding Emperor Hirohito in the earlier years of his reign, but died in 1940. The cabinet, composed of civilian ministers, managed various aspects of governance. However, the increasing militarization of the government meant that military leaders often have more sway than civilian officials appointed by the general, until civilian ministers became blurred with the army, hence the appointment of General Tojo as the Prime Minister. The dual structure of government, with the IJA and IJN operating semi-independently, created a fragmented and often conflicting command environment. This lack of unified leadership led to strategic missteps and inefficiencies, ultimately contributing to Japan's defeat in World War II. In the end, it was a combination of symbolic military and civilian leadership that directed Japan. The emperor provided a unifying figurehead, while military leaders and civilian politicians grappled for control and influence over the nation's direction. Thank you for joining me on this in-depth exploration of Imperial Japan's leadership. If you want to see more political history videos, check out this video and subscribe if you haven't.